Good morning, video audience. I was slightly frizzy today, but I was gonna keep going anyway. Let's see if I can get my phone to work for this at all. I was just waking up, and as I often do, actually been awake for a while now that I come to think about it, I misspoke there. I often check telepathically for contact with a being who identified themselves to me as the star we call Sirius A. They About a couple of years ago, I tried to demonstrate my peaceful intentions with Sirius A. I got involved with one of their other contactees, and in response, I noticed like a glowing orange pod on the horizon kind of approached me. It's like, hey, here I am. And I went, whoa. This glowing orange pod that I've noticed in international media has been sighted in China. I noticed in the 1960s there was a case that they were sighted in the Azores, and this before that, I want to say the 1950s, they were sighted near Sandia National Laboratories. I think it was actually Sandia Labs and not Sandia Mountains. I get dyslexic about those two sometimes. That's been going on since the 1950s, apparently, that these glowing orange pods have been sighted. And I remember one telepathic conversation, these glowing orange pods told me they got involved in an extraterrestrial in Holloman Air Force Base. And it matters what you call the hollow man of Holloman. That matters if that's like an empty suit, or if somebody, this being doesn't seem hollow inside. They seem to have emotions to me. They seem to have emotions. They seem to get upset about social conditions. They seem to be upset about social inequalities with humans, about social pressures. So I don't feel like this is an unfeeling being that I can call the hollow man of Hollow and we need to be scared of them. I feel like this is a being that's endowed with emotions, and I feel like I'm noticing their emotions during these telepathic discussions that I have with them, which I feel like I've been fortunate to do over not quite 2 years, but almost the last 2 years now. It'll be the last 2 years now in August or September, if I'm not mistaken. If I go look at my records, I might go, it's August or September now. That'll have been 2 years. And what the Sirius suggested I discuss this morning were the P3 chairs. They were informing to me about Project Montauk, because the P3 chairs have been discussed publicly before. Apparently, in some circles, you have to get a top secret clearance to learn P3 chairs exist, but they're being discussed in public because it's just top secret. And here in the United States, that's a technology that's, I want to say, supplanted the Montauk chair. The Montauk chair was something in Project Montauk that's also been linked to the public, where the time travel operative in the time travel program Project Montauk can have a chair that they have access to, which supplies psychic drivings, and so that can supplant or supplement the capabilities of Project MK Ultra, where you can provide remote influencing of human beings with Montauk chair. But that's accomplished using a psychic driving, it might be called, and not psychotronics, where psychotronics are like an electronic signal being sent. It's like activating a machine. That psychotronics theoretically are something like there's a machine implanted in somebody, and you're activating the machine with like a satellite. For example, is how that term is very commonly used here in the United States. And obviously that could be good or bad. That could be good if activate psychotronics to a world leader, and they can't. Here we go. Here we go with conduct an unjust war. Maybe I'll say conduct an unjust war, or and I was thinking about the being from Sirius A because they contacted me again this morning, and I don't want to ask them to leave. They told me they cannot leave me unattended because of the situation they found me in. So this being from Sirius A has been in almost constant contact with me for about 2 years now. And they told me that because there's an ethical situation with me, they can't leave me alone. They've described themselves as a Syrian psionic controller before, and they can exert psionic influence. So they can do something, I don't say like telepathic control, but some people might want to call it a telepathic controller, and I think they prefer the term Syrian psionic influencer or Syrian psionic controller. And I wanted to discuss human psionic development this morning, where we're on psychotronics, where there's like electronic stimulation of the human mind with satellites. That could be good or bad. You could accomplish all sorts of goals with that. And they found themselves concerned about the P3 chairs, they're called, that have supplanted the Montauk chair, that have replaced the Montauk chair in certain situations. When I inquired with when I inquired with the Syrian about publicly available material about the P3 chairs, where an operative is sitting in a chair and they can exert psionic influence. Basically, there have been unacceptable plans that have been drawn up with P3 chairs. Why they're unacceptable are for several reasons. And one is that they're attempting to conduct war with extraterrestrial civilizations. I mean, briefed insiders have gone, excuse me, have gone on the record to say that, I mean, from Area 51, that the cooperation with extraterrestrials has been ongoing in Area 51 for, I want to say quite some time. I feel like this is since at least the 1960s, when alien reproduction vehicles were getting more developed in Area 51, because the alien reproduction vehicles have been discussed publicly. Frankly, they resemble the reproduction vehicles resemble vehicles piloted by what are sometimes termed Venusians in extraterrestrial contact circles. So whatever civilization that is must be in contact with them in Area 51, even if their vehicles are mysterious. That seems like a reasonable deduction to me. As a member of the public who knows these things have leaked and they get around the internet. They get around for researchers. Bob Lazar is one source of information there people can look to about that. I'm sure Robert Lazar, who was involved with Area 51, has some credibility. Why we wanted to discuss the P3 chairs, though, was where they were the ethical concerns the Syrian had. And so people want to call the Syrians the hollow men of Holomon, and they're just hollow inside. I'm going, I don't know, they seem to have ethical concerns to me. And what I inquired with the Syrian was, who in our republic are the P3 chairs accountable to? Because because people are going to have, this isn't a democracy, this is a republic. And I'm going, all right, so in a republic we in the public have to have, what was the Greek term? We on the polity have to have some accountability for our appointed representatives. If it's not a democratically controlled thing where the citizens are voting on a democratically controlled program, where's the appointed representative where there's some accountability to us, the voters and the taxpayers? Where's there some accountability to us? Where's the appointed representative? And unfortunately, where we are this morning with something like the P3 chairs that are supplanting Project Montauk is they actually cannot evade the accountability of the ODNI. That the ODNI can go in and require accountability of operatives using controversial psionics technology, which can cause people to feel controlled or influenced from the outside, quite possibly like Project MK Ultra can. But one of the challenges with something like P3 chairs or psionic influencing is how could someone tell that from a mental health issue? Once it's a psionic influencing, it might seem like something in somebody's psychic life, or it's influencing your psyche, and that's reasonable to talk about with someone in the mental health field. Obviously, with most people in the mental health field not being trained to deal with psychotronics or psychic influencing or other kinds of mind control, where people feel controlled from the outside. But that can happen during spiritual experiences too. During spiritual experiences, people can feel like they're being controlled by forces from the outside, like something else is controlling them. And basically, when you take control of your own spiritual life, you might go, oh, something was influencing me from the outside that seemed spiritual in nature, or seemed transdimensional in nature for the skeptics, because this can happen to people who are skeptical of spirit too. And then how do you take control of your transdimensional life? So I'm a bit frizzy, but this is worth continuing. I feel I'm a bit frizzy, but this is worth continuing. Because how do P3 chairs work? I mean, I immediately heard of that psionic influencing and felt like Syrian. That sounds expensive to me. With our federal budget here in the United States already being so insane, I understand there are those connected to the war industry who want me to make up some kind of insane lie to make even bigger war budget. When forgive me, doesn't our country have to balance the budget? Don't we have just such an enormous federal budget deficit? I almost want to look at the numbers, but I'm going to be staggered. And I was going to just have a brief video for my audience here. And so with P3 chairs being an active deployment, they're controversial. What they are apparently they are replacing. I thought they were replacing the traditional old Montauk chairs, which also had some psionic capabilities. But then some of the Montauk operatives were working with an extraterrestrial operative. Was my understanding, is that non-humans were working peacefully with humans. In Project Montauk, though it's going on with time travel and timelines is controversial. So that's where I go to Project Pegasus timeline inspections, where I don't want to put you on the spot. But Project Pegasus, I was informed yesterday that Project Pegasus personnel were performing timeline inspections. And with Project Looking Glass active, it's also controversial what's going on with the convergence of Project Pegasus, Project Montauk, and Project Looking Glass. And so there were Psionics applications that were called the P3 chairs that were deployed, is what this hearing confirmed for me when I was inquiring about this with them. And with the only accountability out there being with the ODNI for such an application, my hope is that people would support the work of the ODNI if the P3 chairs are only accountable to them at the ODNI, because then there can at least be some, even a shred of accountability to the public. With these highly classified programs, how are we how is our country here in the United States functioning as a democratic republic if there's no accountability at all in these programs, as apparently some of the operatives, or I almost want to say is desired on the operations directorate of agencies deploying them. Because if they're being used on the public, there has to be some accountability for the public. We at least have to be able to talk about, this program's so crazy, so expensive. How does it work? And so some of the as I continue, some of the Project Pegasus operatives who are getting older, getting into their teen years and 20s, are performing timeline inspections where they might actually encounter Project Montauk personnel. But then everything can't be Catholic, as some people in Project Looking Glass wanted to hope. I'm sorry to do this after this election, because there's a combination of arable farmland in my state and hungry homeless people, and that just is uncomfortable to me. But basically, America just isn't Catholic. Overall, the demographics. I tolerate Catholics, but there have been a minority who are involved in Project Looking Glass who want the chronovisors, the highly controversial chronovisors, to take control of other time travel programs away from them. And frankly, that can't be done. What's going on there is they want to relegate all other time travel to being that was not performed under the guidance of the Holy See, to being time travel that was performed by a fallen angel or performed by a demon. And this is argued with a false dichotomy, where all time travel that was not performed under the supervision of the Vatican is performed by a demon is going to be a narrative some of them wanted to weave, and I noticed that made me feel uncomfortable. Even as some people believe my demons are nice, actually, and they're good, really, and they're nice to me. Certainly, I don't want to interfere with anybody who's questioning the God of Adam about original sin, where I'm frustrated with the God of Adam because of my original sin as well, and I do not want to invalidate anyone in that audience. And so as Project Pegasus personnel inspect the timelines that have been part of Project Montauk and Project Pegasus and are now being integrated in Project Looking Glass, as they inspect between timelines, they're allowed to update an artificial intelligence system. Especially the Project Pegasus operatives who are getting older in their teen years and 20s, like I said. They're allowed to continue updating an artificial intelligence system that will help people possibly understand what's going on in timelines. But then I wondered, how does that affect the Ancient Arrow Project? Frankly, sometimes, what people in the Ancient Arrow Project need to know is sometimes you're scary to Project Pegasus because you're like Project Serpo. You're like, an adult's going to come in here with like a gun possibly and be super insane as far as I can tell. And so people in the Ancient Arrow Project need to understand you can be as scary to Project Pegasus participants as Project Serpo is. As Project Serpo can be. I don't want to make Project Serpo scary, because obviously it can have peaceful applications where we're just sending a diplomat here or sending a diplomat there. Project Serpo, of course, being a secret space program that was in consultation with Planet Serpo, alleged by former Canadian Minister of Defense Paul Hellyer and others. And I don't know, my gut take is that Planet Serpo is real, and that former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer was not suffering from dementia or mental health issues close to the time when he passed from his body. and that there's something else going on there, that there was some genuine contact going on there. That's my gut hunch as a researcher, and I know to trust my gut. I never regretted it. Every time in life I haven't trusted my gut, or almost every time I didn't trust my gut. And so Project Pegasus personnel are allowed to continue timeline inspections in certain situations, especially where, frankly, in situations in Project Looking Glass where the church was trying to exert influence over non-Catholics and trying to have, here's someone who's not a Catholic or not a practicing Catholic, is sometimes said of Project Looking Glass, where someone was trying to be like a Catholic dictator. Because then I have to face the awkward issue that God has manifested differently before for Catholics. If somebody wants to centralize control of time travel under Catholics in Project Looking Glass, I have to go, what about Benito Mussolini? I'm sorry about Amicizia landings and making Amicizia uncomfortable. But basically, Benito Mussolini and a bunch of Italians were sure that God hated Jews. They were sure that the God of Adam, as I call him, hated Jews. And it was an occult secret about Ein Sof Or's existence to some of them, for Jews and others who worship Ein Sof Or and consider themselves holy Jews. Sometimes people are going to feel like you don't have a connection to God at all because they worship the God of Adam, is how I feel. I feel like it's a separate man that lives in a separate light tube. And so basically this morning I respect polytheists. I often think about polytheists here in the West that have like a Western equivalent to polytheism. It's a similar idea to polytheism, but I feel like the God of Adam is different than Ein Sof Or sometimes. With apologies to monotheists who want to bring works that would be good to me into impoverished areas of the world. Like I'm certainly not going to oppose all charity about this. That's wrong to do, but I have to acknowledge my experience as a psychic, where I analyze my cognitive experience, I look at what's affecting my psyche, and sometimes, I trust my gut, but then I'll turn to my thoughts and analyze it, and I'll analyze the experience I'm having, which does have religious or spiritual elements in nature to it. But that I just got aside, because there are going to be situations in Project Looking Glass where with the control being, when with people trying to have Catholics take control of their lives away completely from non-Catholics, in situations where the person wasn't Catholic or practicing Catholic, then Project Pegasus personnel might want to inspect. It's like, why are you locking non-Catholics out of this? And so there still has to be a place for non-Catholics here in the United States, in time travel programs here in the United States, apparently, according to, has not been disconfirmed by the Syrian who's contacting me. And I've been grateful for the Syrian over the last couple of years, where they told me that accountability cannot be removed from controversial psionics programs that are involved with the technology, sometimes called the P3 chair, replacing the Montauk chair. And so I got off track there because I often think about time travel programs and how that's affecting our reality throughout the days. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me, video audience, and I will check in with you later.